Welcome to my channel, dear students and viewers. Today we are going to look at the sonnets of Shakespeare in this presentation entitled Locating Love, Life and Laughter, a reading of Shakespeare's sonnets. In this presentation, I will be discussing two sonnets in particular, Sonnet 18 and Sonnet 130. This is the cover page of Shakespeare's Quarto edition of sonnets that was published in 1609. Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets in all and a long poem entitled The Lover's Complaint. These 154 sonnets were first published in the Quarto edition. It is addressed by an unidentified I to an unidentified D or U. As the photo here will show you, it is addressed to the only begetter of these inspiring sonnets, Mr. W.H., all happiness and that eternity promised, by our ever-living poet wisheth, the well-wishing adventurer in setting forth, and is inscribed T.T. The textual apparatus includes a dedication as we just read, though it is not clear whether it is the dedication by the poet or by the publisher. Hence, we come to two main problems. The first one, who is the begetter? Does it mean the writer or the provider of the manuscript? Does it mean the patron of the poet? Or does it imply the primary love object of the sonnets? The second of the problems. Who was this W.H.? Was it William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke? Or was this W.H. mischievously inverted from the H.W. meaning Henley Wriothesley, the Earl of Southampton? There are certain unanswered questions which Shakespeare has left behind. What could be the period of composition of these sonnets? Is it 1593 to 1603 as suggested by the Oxford editors, or does it span an even longer time? Were these sonnets written even earlier than 1593? The second one, are the sonnets autobiographical? Because most of the sonnets written in the Petrarchan sonnet tradition by Petrarch himself and his followers such as Rosard, and the English sonnetiers such as Wyatt, Surrey, Sidney and Spenser are mostly autobiographical. Whether the poet authorized the printing and publishing of the sonnets. Did Shakespeare know that his sonnets are being published? Did he authorize them? All of us know that the English sonnetiers mostly had sonnet sequences to their credits. We have Astrophil and Stella by Sir Philip Sidney. We have Edmund Spenser's sonnet sequence, Amoretti, and now we are faced with this 154 sonnets by Shakespeare. Do they constitute an organized sequence? Then we come to another very important question. Do the sonnets together constitute a narrative? Out of these 154 sonnets, 127 sonnets are addressed to the fair friend and the rest to the dark lady. Is there any kind of narrative continuity in the 127 sonnets addressed to the fair friend, and even in the 27 odd sonnets addressed to the dark lady? The last two questions are the most potent in the Shakespearean oeuvre. Who is the fair friend? Who is the dark lady? We come to Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It is one of the most popular and widely anthologized sonnet addressed to the fair friend. In this picture, we have a very humorous take on this sonnet where a lady is as if asking a flustered poet the question, "Compare me to a summer's day in this country." Sonnet 18 is the first sonnet under our consideration. As we said earlier, sonnets 1 to 126 record Shakespeare's intense love for a young man, fair in looks, aristocratic in birth and upbringing, and possibly the poet's patron or benefactor. However, the Shakespeare's address to the fair friend has raised many uncomfortable questions regarding the relationship that existed between the poet and his fair friend. It is pertinent to mention here that same-sex love relationships can be traced to Plato's Symposium and Virgil's Eclogues. Shakespeare follows Neoplatonic conceits, and his love for his fair friend is higher and spiritual and not banal enough to be sexual or physical. Instead of keeping his fair friend completely in his dear possession, he requests his friend to marry and to beget children so that his beauty is carried onward in future. When we come to the blending of tradition and individual talent in Shakespeare's sonnets, we are accosted with the different qualities of the Petrarchan tradition as well as Shakespeare's own ingenuity. The Petrarchan tradition of love and complete commitment is found in his poems as well. He starts by referring to the most beautiful experiences and stock images, and then resorts to age-old dichotomy between mutability, mortality, and immutability, immortality. Shakespeare asks the question, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" and as if in response answers, "Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date." By placing the fair friend as a part of nature and beyond it, the poet at once sublimates his center of attraction, and later on by using figures of speech such as the eye of heaven, and by comparing the poet's friend's youth to eternal summer, he at once gives the entire relationship that exists between them a surreal tone. When we are accosted with the question of individual talent of the poet, we find that his talent goes beyond the Petrarchan tradition by deflecting from both the form as well as the content of the sonnet. Unlike the traditional octave-sestet form that was practiced by Petrarch and his English followers, Shakespeare conforms to the English model that was popularized by sonnetiers such as Wyatt and Surrey by introducing 3 quatrains and a concluding couplet. However, Shakespeare improvises by introducing a volta or a turn in the concluding couplet. Another point of departure from the Petrarchan tradition was that instead of a beautiful and almost unattainable woman, the poet posits a young aristocratic and handsome man as the object of his desire. This was unthought of in the Petrarchan tradition. We next come to the Dark Lady sonnet, a very famous sonnet in Shakespeare's entire poetic corpus. This sonnet has been anthologized frequently and is very well known among the students of literature. This is sonnet 130, which begins, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare." In this sonnet, Shakespeare boasts defiantly of his mistress's dark complexion and the absence of the conventional attributes of female beauty. So far as the driving force of male lust is concerned, Sonnet 130 may suggest that the traditional forms of beauty celebrated in love poetry are unnecessary to provoke desire. All that is necessary is that the object of desire is loving and most close to the poet. In the picture which is also given beside the text of the poem, we find a very funny representation of what Shakespeare tries to say. These three are pictures of the possible figures of the Dark Lady. It might be Mary Fitton, who was the Queen's maid, Amelia Bassano, a Negro lady, and I have also included Ian Wilson's famous book Shakespeare's Dark Lady here for you all to see. In the Sonnet 130, we find the use of the reverse blazon trope. Shakespeare uses the three quatrains to interrogate and completely rubbish the tall claims of other sonnetteers who exaggerate feminine beauty to improbable heights. On a first reading, this sonnet appears to shock readers out of complacency. It develops the anti-Petrarchan stance by denying to the poet's dark mistress such hyperbolic attributes as are conventionally associated with any woman who is addressed by a lover. Like other sonnets of Shakespeare, this sonnet too is remarkable for its imagery. However, in the couplet, a Cheek and Jowl manner destabilizes the age-old conventions by humanizing the woman and resisting deification. Let us now attempt a comparison between the two poems, Sonnet 18 and Sonnet 130. Both these poems are poems of love addressed to persons who endeared themselves to the poet for their unique virtues. Both poems use similar imagery, images of nature. In Sonnet 18, the references are to the English summer, the flowers, the sun, the breeze, while Sonnet 130 too makes use of the traditional images of natural beauty. Both poems build up a particular image of the beloved, and the message in the concluding couplet leaves the most important message about him or her. Interestingly, both the conclusions also tell a lot about the poet. And here I am talking exactly about the volta which I mentioned earlier. The concluding couplet talks about his poetic sensibility, his confidence in his poetic capabilities, his singular skill to look beyond the obvious and to confer immortality not only to the object of his love, the fair friend or the dark lady, but also to his own creation, which immortalizes his beloved persons. In both Sonnet 18 and 130, one can almost discern a happy-go-lucky poet, supremely nonchalant, even potentially subversive of the very traditions of sonneteering which he appropriates, yet plays with the stereotypes and conventions the poets before him had so painstakingly created. We have here the poet who uses the tradition but then turns it topsy-turvy. And now let us look at the contrasts in these two poems. In Sonnet 18, the poet portrays the impeccable virtues of his beloved friend, whereas in Sonnet 130, all the flaws of his dark lady are catalogued. Unlike other sonnetteers, the beloved whose beauty is highlighted in Sonnet 18 is a man, not a woman, like Laura or Stella or Celia, as depicted by earlier sonnetteers. In Sonnet 18 again, the poet tries to eternalize his beloved through his poetic potential. He says, and I quote, "So long lives this, and this gives life to thee." However, Sonnet 130 is apparently misogynistic, but actually relies on the contrastive force of negation to highlight the vacuity of forced artificial comparisons and defies any attempt at making a goddess out of a human. If you look at the poem Sonnet 130 very closely, you will find that he is possessing one virtue of his beloved and then negating it. For instance, by stating that my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, he is challenging the sonnetteers who claimed the brightness of their beloved's eyes was more than the sun. He tries, in other words, to make a human being out of the goddess which all his previous sonnetteers tried to project. Sonnet 18 thrives on hyperbole, but Sonnet 130 sums up the evils of hyperbole by the tempered nature of real human love. In conclusion, let us look at what Shakespeare attempts to do in his sonnets. He refuses, like a master craftsman, to adhere to the Elizabethan tradition of picture making and believes in the innate humanity, whether of a man or of a woman. Our reading of both these sonnets are enough to substantiate that. Shakespeare is the Renaissance humanist as well as the 21st century feminist for whom the traditional trappings of beauty are ridiculous. He believes that in life, love should reign supreme, love that brooks no boundaries, and love that makes one a better human being. At present, we try to sublimate love either for a man or for a woman, and we try to legitimize it. Let us note that our very dear poet Shakespeare has been trying to do that so many hundreds of years before. In his ability to disregard set conventions, Shakespeare laughs out at the absurdity of cultural constructs and comes across as a Renaissance man who is truly our contemporary. I end by presenting to you this extremely funny take on William Shakespeare, but with the necessary statistics. I hope that you liked my discussion on Shakespeare's Sonnets 18 and 130. Do let me know what you think of it. Thank you.